He jumped into a pit to save an alien child, then woke up to the Queen at his bedside. Jenson swore under his breath, the taste of metallic dust already thick on his tongue. The geothermal stabilizer he was attempting to recalibrate had locked up solid, refusing to acknowledge the manual override, and the air on Edla was heavy with the pressure of a brewing seismic event. Edla was beautiful, in a primal, dangerous way. All jagged, black volcanic glass and rolling hills of red, iron-rich sand, claimed by the Zydonian Empire as their latest, most volatile colony. Jenson, a human planetary surveyor contracted for the hazardous work, preferred the honesty of the planet's dangers to the calculated, emotionless perfection of its rulers. He was wrestling with a fused conduit when the royal transport descended. It wasn't announced. The Zydonian Queen Zylpha moved with the unblinking surety of an apex predator. He straightened, brushing sand from his work fatigues just as the ramp hissed down. Queen Zylpha emerged, a figure of impossible, engineered perfection. Her long, platinum blonde hair flowed over her obsidian-black duty armor, catching the low red sunlight like liquid metal. Her features, which to the untrained eye might appear human, were too flawless, too perfectly proportioned, making her brilliant green eyes seem like high-powered analytical instruments. She was followed by two Zydonian guards, including Captain Gell, moving in synchronized economical strides. At her side walked a small Zydonian child, the heir, Kell, whose movements were hesitant, easily overshadowed by her mother's absolute authority. Zylpha approached the seismographic station, her focus absolute, her amber eyes flicking over Jenson without acknowledging him as a person, only as a piece of necessary maintenance equipment. "Status report, surveyor," she ordered, her voice a low, modulated tone that vibrated more than it spoke. "Seismic stabilizer 5 is locked," Jenson reported, his blue eyes alert, meeting her intense gaze. He was ruggedly built, his short dark hair clinging to his head, and he carried the coiled tension of a man always ready to move. "I'm forcing a chemical scrub now, but if that microtremor forecast hits in the next 20 minutes, this entire sector is going to go critical." She paused, considering his data. "The margin of error is acceptable. Proceed with extraction." It was then the ground shuddered, not a microtremor, but a tearing, violent convulsion. A deep fracture, steaming with superheated gas, ripped open the ground right next to the inspection platform. Kell, startled and unsteady, stumbled. The polished black ground crumbled beneath his small feet, and with a choked cry, the air vanished into the toxic, seething maw. Gell, the guard captain, took one precise step forward, then froze. His training, the Zydonian logic drilled into his very genetic code, dictated a risk assessment. The toxic density from the raw geothermal vent was 98% lethal to Zydonian biology without full atmospheric filtration. Protocol demanded an immediate call for specialized retrieval, a process that would take 90 seconds. 90 seconds Kell did not have. Jenson didn't calculate. He didn't think about his suit, which had already flagged a minor filtration breach. He thought about the small, terrified alien child whose eyes had gone wide with shock. With a primal shout of pure human, irrational instinct, he ripped his helmet clean off, tossing it aside. The sudden rush of raw, unmediated, lethal gas hit his lungs like a fist, scorching his throat. He dove headfirst into the volcanic fissure, ignoring the searing heat radiating from the rock and the thick, suffocating smell of sulfurous toxins that promised neural failure. His powerful human frame jammed slightly in the narrow opening, slowing his descent just enough. He saw Kell, clinging weakly to a shelf of cooling magma barely 10 meters down. Jenson ignored the burning pain in his lungs, the dizzying rush of the alien toxins flooding his bloodstream. He didn't use a grapple or a technological tether. He simply reached out and grabbed the small, frightened alien body, hauling Kell close to his chest. With a grunt of pure, adrenaline-fueled brute force, Jenson scrambled back up the fractured rock face. He used his knees, his elbows, and every ounce of unaugmented human muscle, scrambling upwards through the thick, deadly plume. He broke the surface, coughing violently, the air tasting like acid, and thrust the child into the waiting, rigid arms of Gell. Then the world turned to white noise. Jenson's muscles seized. The human biological machine, pushed far beyond its designed limits, finally collapsed. As the ground rushed up to meet him, his last conscious thought was the sight of Queen Zylpha. Her impossible green eyes, which usually so cold and focused, were locked on his face, but the focus was no longer analytical. It was proprietary. It was absolute, and it held a faint, unsettling flicker of something that could only be described as desire. Jenson woke to silence. It was a silence so profound and absolute, it felt manufactured. He was naked beneath sheets of shimmering, cool silk, lying on a vast circular bed in a room that was less a recovery ward and more a piece of living, minimalist sculpture. The walls were high-polished jet, and the air was perfectly filtered, scented only with something subtly herbal and clean. He sat up, the raw ache in his lungs a dull throb, but the expected neural damage and paralysis were absent. A door showed out of existence, and Queen Zylpha entered. She was wearing a garment of simple, floor-length silver fabric that clung to the impossibly smooth lines of her body. Her movements were gliding, silent, and entirely controlled. She didn't approach the bed, instead pausing at the foot, observing him like a specimen under a microscope. "Welcome back, Surveyor Jenson," she stated, her voice devoid of human warmth. "You are currently aboard the Aethel's Eye, my private orbital station." "The kid? Kel?" Jenson's voice was hoarse, raspy. He swallowed, the movement painful. "The air is stable," Zylpha replied, lifting a slender arm. A projected screen materialized next to her, displaying a complex molecular diagram. The dosage of AT toxins AT3 he received was sublethal thanks to your timely intervention. For you, the scenario was classified as 99.7% terminal. Your recovery is illogical. Jenson swung his legs over the side of the bed, planting his feet firmly on the cool floor. His posture was defensive, coiled. "Disappoint is an emotional term, human. You have survived a dose of AT3 that would shut down Zydonian neural function within minutes. Your filtration suit was compromised before your descent, yet your pulmonary and circulatory systems adapted. Your immune response was not protocol-driven, it was raw, chaotic, and devastatingly effective." She finally moved, gliding forward to the side of the bed. She lifted a hand and Jenson instinctively tensed. She wasn't threatening him, but her touch felt like an absolute command. Her impossibly long, perfect fingers, tipped with black, polished nails, pressed lightly against the strong column of his throat, feeling for his pulse. "We, the Zydonians, are facing extinction, Jenson," she murmured, the proximity sending an unexpected spike of heat through him. "The Crimson Blight, a pervasive galactic spore, is rendering our highly specialized immune systems useless. Perfection has made us brittle. We require a biological solution, a generalized, messy, primitive immunity capable of adapting to the unknown." Her gaze, those brilliant green eyes, dropped to his chest, tracing the line of his clavicle. "Your body, your resilience, is now the most valuable resource in the Zydonian Empire, and it belongs to me." The absolute authority in her voice broke no argument. His raw, human resistance, however, was already building a storm in his chest. Jenson spent the next several cycles in the Queen's private observation laboratory, a vast, echoing space with zero gravity wells and walls composed entirely of shifting biometric data streams. The luxury of his chambers contrasted sharply with the clinical reality. He was a high-value specimen. Queen Zylpha was his sole observer and physician. She conducted the tests herself, using cutting-edge yet surprisingly intimate devices. The tension between them was a taut, invisible wire, stretched between the pole of her rigorous logic and the pole of his defiant physical presence. "Recount the sequence of the event on Aethel," Zylpha commanded, standing close as she affixed delicate neurosensors to the base of his neck, her cool fingertips brushing the short hairs there. He was clad only in light monitoring silks, acutely aware of her proximity. "I saw the kid fall. My suit was down, I went in," Jenson recited, his jaw clenched against the involuntary shiver her touch provoked. "Incorrect. I require the neurological sequence, Jenson. Describe the shift from external observation to self-sacrificial action. Quantify the emotional impetus." "It wasn't quantified," he retorted, his voice low. "It was instinct. He was a kid in trouble. I acted." "Acted," she repeated, the word an alien curiosity in her mouth. She pressed a small emitter against his ribs, and a focused field of low-level energy surged through his nervous system. Jenson gasped, his muscles locking tight. It wasn't agonizing, but it was intensely overwhelming. "This is a simulation of high-density neural overload," she explained, her voice remaining perfectly calm, even as his breath hitched. "The Zydonian response is shut down, a protective measure. Your human response is to focus the pain, to channel the chaos into acute physical reaction. Show me." He was trembling, sweat beading on his forehead, but Jenson refused to cry out. He gripped the edges of the examination table, forcing his consciousness not into resistance, but into control. He focused the overwhelming sensation, not trying to escape it, but mastering it, allowing it to sharpen his senses, just as adrenaline had on Ethel. This human capacity to not only endure pain, but to channel it, was an anomaly Zylpha had never encountered. Zylpha's pupils dilated almost imperceptibly as she watched him. The observation was no longer clinical, it had become deeply personal. She slowly deactivated the emitter. "Fascinating," she breathed, leaning closer, her beautiful, impossibly perfect face mere centimeters from his. His body was reacting with a primal, animalistic heat to her controlled, demanding proximity. She was logical, dominant, and determined to possess him, not through love, but through the species imperative. Jenson's defiance was melting under the heat of her absolute, analytical desire. The scientific examination had transitioned into a dominating, physical connection, one where his raw human body was being systematically conquered by the will of the Queen. Jenson's status as a biological subject shifted abruptly to that of a primary security risk. During a routine observation session where Jenson was undergoing genetic sequencing, Zylpha received an encrypted data burst. The shift in her posture was instantaneous and telling. Her shoulders, which were usually held in perfect, rigid command, drew inward almost imperceptibly. "Threat assessment indicates a severe internal vulnerability," Zylpha murmured, dismissing the holograms with a sharp wave of her hand. "What is it?" Jenson asked, pulling himself up onto the examination table. Zylpha turned, her brilliant green eyes troubled for the first time. "A faction within the Zydonian High Command, the Purity Collective, views your presence as a genetic contamination. They believe our species should be culled by the Blight rather than dilute our bloodline with primitive human genetics." The twist hit Jenson with the force of an unexpected solar flare. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a desperate, internecine war. "Who leads them?" Jenson hesitated, a flicker of genuine emotional turmoil crossing her flawless features. "My brother, Vanas. He is rigid,
influential, and believes I have betrayed our ancestral perfection. He tried to kill your heir, didn't he? He engineered the blast on Aethel, knowing the protocol would paralyze your guards. Zylpha simply nodded, her silver hair shimmering in the dim light. His intent was to eliminate the heir and cripple my administration. Your unplanned intervention ruined his calculated treason. The new reality was terrifying. Jenson was now a target, not for his heroism, but for his biology. He was the most dangerous asset in the galaxy, and the Queen's own family wanted him dead. I am relocating you, Zylpha stated, her voice hardening with resolve. The observation lab is compromised. You will be moved to my personal residential wing. Enhanced security will be implemented immediately. He had been moved from a scientific prison to a golden cage. He was still her property, but now she was her protected property, escalating the intimacy of his captivity.
I need to understand your motivations, Jenson, Zylpha admitted, her voice low. Your choice to sacrifice yourself defied every known logical response matrix. This love for an abstract ideal of survival, for an unrelated individual, it is the core of your resilience, isn't it? Jenson stood, bridging the distance between them. He reached out, taking her hand. Her skin was cool, almost ceramic, but she didn't pull away. It's not an abstract ideal, Zylpha, he told her gently. It's connection. It's knowing that my life matters less than a child's future. That's why we fight, why we build, why we survive. It's what you Zydonians traded away for perfection. He squeezed her hand. I'm not a blueprint, Zylpha. I'm a man. And if you want my resilience, you have to accept the chaos that comes with it. Zylpha's expression was unreadable, her amber eyes searching his face, mapping the complex, contradictory emotions that drove him. He had exposed a fundamental flaw in her flawless world. The solution to her problem was not a substance she could extract, but a spirit she had to accept. Zylpha's private residential wing was the epitome of restrained Zydonian luxury, a perfect synthesis of comfort and function. But Jenson was not comfortable. The confinement grated on his essential human need for agency. One cycle after their move, Zylpha found him not in the relaxation chamber she had assigned, but in a small, unadorned fitness area, rigged with high-G tensors. He was performing a chaotic, intense routine of push-ups, explosive lunges, and punching into an unyielding inertial field, his body slick with sweat, his mind focused entirely on the raw physical exertion. You are disrupting your equilibrium, Zylpha observed, leaning against the archway, her posture perfectly serene. Rest is optimal for cellular recovery. Jenson finished his current set, pushing out a final shuddering rep before rolling to his feet. His blue eyes, intense and challenging, met her green gaze. I need control, Zylpha, he stated, grabbing a towel. Your sterile perfection will make me slow. My resilience isn't just in my blood, it's in my will to fight. Chaos in training leads to inefficiency in combat. Chaos in training leads to adaptability, Jenson shot back, tossing the towel aside. His body was a study of taut, powerful human muscle, radiating a heat that was entirely biological. He strode toward her,
closing the distance quickly, forcing her to hold her ground, challenging her rigid control. The air crackled with suppressed energy. "You want my human chaos?" Jenson challenged, his voice a low growl. "Then you accept the disorder. You accept that I am not just a specimen to be studied, but a force that must be respected." He placed his hands on the polished jet wall, boxing her in. His proximity was overwhelming. His raw, unmasked desire was a physical force that pressed against her rigid composure. Zylpha's breath hitched, a silent, non-verbal cue that was a massive admission of her emotional vulnerability. "I see the need for agency," Zylpha admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand rose, not to push him away, but to press flat against the hot skin of his chest, directly over his pounding heart. "Your rhythm is erratic, powerful. It demands release." The clinical facade shattered entirely. This was no longer an examination. It was a confrontation of wills, the logical and the emotional. Zylpha was driven by the supreme logic of species survival, but the raw force of Jenson's resistance had ignited a deep, illogical, and possessive desire in her. "Release it, then," Jenson challenged, leaning down, allowing the scent of his sweat and heat to invade her perfect, sterile space. Zylpha's eyes closed briefly, a moment of internal calculation, before she acted with the absolute economic efficiency of a queen making a critical, life-altering decision. She abandoned her clinical distance, pulling Jenson's face down to hers. The kiss was not soft. It was demanding, proprietary, driven by her species' need to conquer and possess. She explored his mouth with a demanding intensity, searching, analyzing, and ultimately surrendering to the overwhelming sensation of his raw human heat. Her hands moved, discarding the light training silks he wore. Her cold, precise touch traced every hot, powerful line of his torso. The logical extraction had failed. What replaced it was a visceral, primal need to claim his strength, his chaos, his spirit. On the floor of the gymnasium, surrounded by the holographic remnants of her analytical equipment, Zylpha yielded to the profound, overwhelming truth that to gain the resilience of the human, she had to accept the inherent, beautiful mess of his emotions, his freedom, and his body. The scientific solution had become terrifyingly, wonderfully personal. The realization that she desperately needed his unpredictable nature was the greatest surrender of logic she had ever experienced.
The intimate confrontation had redefined their relationship. Zylpha still held absolute authority, but she now acknowledged Jenson's agency. She was no longer studying a specimen. She was training a partner. Jenson pushed his limits daily in the station's high-G simulator, a brutalist cage where gravity and pressure could be manipulated to extremes. Zylpha was often there, observing, participating. "Your form is wasteful," Zylpha noted, watching him use a sweeping, chaotic body block to take down a combat drone, rather than the precise pressure point strike she had taught him. "My form works," Jenson gasped, pulling himself to his feet, breathing heavily. "Your Zydonian arts are perfect for a perfect environment. I train for failure. I train for the unexpected. I train for a fist to the face when my tech is dead." She stepped into the ring, dressed in lightweight combat silks, her body moving with liquid, lethal grace. "Show me," she challenged. He engaged her. Zylpha's defense was flawless, her movements economical, designed to use minimum energy for maximum effect. But Jenson's style was pure, aggressive, primal brawling. He faked high, kicked low, used unpredictable feints and dirty maneuvers. His chaotic, instinctive movements were impossible to predict by the Zydonian's linear, logic-based combat calculations. He wasn't faster, he was simply more unpredictable.
He finally managed to pin her against the metallic wall, his body pressed against hers, his breath ragged. He held her there, not with force, but with the sheer surprise of his unorthodox attack. Zylpha looked up at him, her beautiful features flushed with exertion. "Your volatility is a formidable weapon, Jenson." "It's who I am," he said, his voice deep and insistent. "I'm not a shield or a blueprint. I'm a weapon for hire, and I need to be deployed where I can do the most good." Jenson knew he had to break the confinement. He demanded, "Let me go with you to the Velo trade station. Your diplomatic mission is a perfect trap for Vanis. You need eyes that aren't bound by Zydonian protocol." Zylpha hesitated, a deep internal conflict warring in her eyes. "It is too great a risk." "The risk is staying here, waiting for the assassin with the perfect algorithm," Jenson countered. "You need the chaos. You need the human variable." She finally conceded, a small, almost painful nod. "Agreed. But you will remain within my security parameters." "I'll remain within my own," Jenson corrected, his gaze holding hers. "But I promise you, I'll be watching your back." The tension between them was now complex, no longer just desire and dominance, but trust and reliance. As they planned the mission, Zylpha confessed the full depth of her family's betrayal. "Vanis was groomed to lead the fleet. He believes my partnership with you is treason that must be cleansed with blood." Her expression was one of cold determination. "He will not stop." The Velo trade station was a neutral zone, a swirling, vibrant nexus of galactic commerce and intrigue. Its atmosphere was thick with 1,000 conflicting signals, a cacophony that would have paralyzed a Zydonian, but which Jenson processed with his natural, hyper-vigilant human awareness. Jenson, now outwardly serving as Zylpha's chief of security, was dressed in clean, functional black Zydonian silks, but his posture was all human, restless, scanning, alert. Queen Zylpha, radiant and imposing in her official armor, proceeded toward the diplomatic suite, flanked by Gel and a detail of standard Zydonian guards. While Zylpha engaged in the meticulous, logic-bound negotiations typical of the Zydonian Empire, Jenson stood at the edge of the perimeter, his striking blue eyes constantly flicking over the busy concourse. The Zydonian guards were focused, but their focus was narrow. They tracked known threats and calculated risks based on protocol. Jenson was tracking aberrations. He saw her instantly. Rila, the Purity Collective operative, was dressed in the standard anonymous gray uniform of a station maintenance tech. She was meticulously following the established maintenance path, but her timing was off by 1.4 seconds on the current sector sweep, a minor deviation invisible to Zydonian logic, which expected perfect adherence. Jenson's gut clenched. Human instinct, that ancient, messy algorithm of paranoia, pattern recognition, and fear, screamed at him. Rila paused near a bulky atmospheric filtration unit adjacent to the diplomatic suite's energy conduit. She knelt, simulating a diagnostic check, but the motion of her hand was too focused, too deliberate as she affixed a small metallic sphere to the base of the unit, a pulse bomb, designed to disable the Zydonian Guard's systems and disrupt Zylpha's communications before a secondary assassination team moved in. Jenson didn't need data confirmation. He trusted the animal certainty of his mind. He caught Gel's eye, shaking his head once, a sharp, entirely non-verbal cue, and then, without waiting for protocol, he moved. He didn't run. He launched. He closed the 30 meters between himself and the target in a sprint of pure, unadulterated human speed and power, his legs pumping with explosive, primal force. Jenson was 10 meters away when Rila looked up, her expression freezing in calculated surprise. She detonated the pulse bomb prematurely. The concourse lights flickered out. A blinding, localized energy surge hit the immediate area, screaming through the trade station's power grid. The blast didn't kill, but it did exactly what Vanis intended. It disabled the Zydonian suits, scrambling the guards' sensory feedback and locking their energy weapons. Gel and the guards stumbled, momentarily paralyzed by system failure. Chaos erupted. Zylpha cried out, momentarily exposed as her high-tech armor locked up. Jenson ignored the pain of the high-frequency sonic disruption flooding his ears. The loss of light was minimal to his human eyes. He reached the filtration unit first, shoving Rila aside with a savage, efficient blow. The diplomatic suite was secured by a heavy, magnetically sealed door, but the pulse had fused the lock, leaving Zylpha and the delegates trapped inside. Jenson knew what came next: the hard kill team. He scanned the immediate environment with lightning-fast improvisation. The Zydonian guards were useless, still rebooting. He didn't look for advanced weaponry. He looked for simple physics. He spotted an abandoned maintenance trolley containing a coil of thick, multi-strand steel cable, the most primitive of tools. He snatched it, wrapping the cable around the bomb-damaged door conduit. He braced his feet against the floor, his massive human muscles screaming, and hauled on the steel cable with a savage, desperate, brute force heave. The metal groaned. The complex Zydonian fusion seal resisted, but the cable, combined with Jenson's raw, unaugmented strength, forced the fused door plating to shift by just 3 critical centimeters, enough to create a physical barrier and stabilize the structural integrity against further immediate attack. The assassination team, Zydonian operatives armed with traditional low-tech plasma pistols, rounded the corner. Jenson didn't wait. He grabbed a heavy, discarded Zydonian environmental regulator, a simple metallic cube, and hurled it with deadly accuracy, striking the lead assassin in the head. He was a whirlwind of pure, chaotic human motion, diving, rolling, and using the immobilized Zydonian guards as cover. He didn't fight logically, he fought to survive, relying on raw instinct and his human body's capacity for rapid, improvised action. The fight lasted less than 60 seconds. When the dust settled, Jenson stood over the neutralized attackers, his breathing heavy, his face streaked with sweat and dust, completely unprotected, the only active force in the room. He looked up. Zylpha had managed to pry the diplomatic door open, her beautiful face pale beneath her perfect features, her brilliant green eyes wide open with shock, fixed entirely on him. She saw not the surveyor, but the savage, magnificent resilience of humanity personified.
Back aboard the Ethel's Eye, the sterile environment felt foreign to the raw, adrenaline-fueled aftermath of the violence. Jenson was checked for injuries in a standard medical bay. Zylpha refused to let him return to the lab. The fallout was immediate. Vanis's entire plan had been neutralized by a human who defied logic, protocol, and technological reliance. The Purity Collective was exposed, but the betrayal cut Zylpha to the core. She entered the medical bay, dismissing the Zydonian medics with a curt gesture. She was no longer wearing silks or armor, but a simple, seamless black shift. Her posture was weary, her absolute control momentarily absent. "Vanis has been detained," she said, her voice hollow. His logic for my elimination was calculated and sound. He predicted every variable except the speed of your human response in your improvisational capacity. Jenson sat on the examination table, pulling her close when she came within reach. He placed his hands on her waist, drawing her into the warmth of his body. "Logic is a tool, Zylpha, not a foundation," Jenson said, rubbing his thumb along her smooth side. She leaned into him, resting her perfect face against the heated skin of his shoulder. This was the most vulnerable she had ever been. "I watched your every move on the concourse, Jenson. The speed, the chaos, the way you disregarded your own life to ensure mine. It is utterly non-Zydonian, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed." Her hands moved from his shoulder to his chest, gripping his shirt. "My species requires your chaos, Jenson. We require your heart." The last of her clinical detachment vanished.
The logic of species survival had given way to the emotional imperative of a queen who had found the one being capable of defending her, not with systems, but with spirit. "I have made my final calculation," Zylpha declared, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes, her own brilliant green gaze burning with fierce intensity. "You will not be my subject. You will be my equal. You will be my consort." The command was absolute, but the implication was a profound, galaxy-defining surrender. She was not asking for his seed, she was declaring a fundamental shift in Zydonian evolutionary policy, accepting the chaos of human biology and spirit into her royal line. Jenson accepted the gravity of the decision with a slow, powerful nod. "Consort, huh? That means I get a say in the security protocol, right?" A genuine, breathtaking smile, a rare, unguarded human expression that felt almost alien on her perfect features, crossed her face. "It means you have a voice at the highest level of Zydonian command, Jenson, and that you will give me what my species needs to survive." The final, deeply sensual union that followed was no longer a scientific experiment or a dominant claim. It was an act of profound, mutual possession. Zylpha embraced Jenson's unpredictable nature, urging him to surrender his protective shell, while Jenson submitted to her command, knowing that her need was coupled with an equally fierce, logical devotion. The future of the Zydonian Empire, vast and technologically advanced, was being founded in the simple, raw emotional heat of a human man and his queen. The Zydonian throne room was a cavernous space of black obsidian and shimmering silver fiber optics. Now, there were subtle, revolutionary changes. Jenson had insisted on them. Large sections of the walls had been replaced with transparent polycarbonate, allowing the cold, natural light of the nebula outside to flood the chamber. Earth-based air-filtering ferns and mosses grew in manicured pockets, introducing the complex scent of living, adapting biology. Queen Zylpha, in full, shimmering ceremonial regalia, stood before the High Council. By her side stood Jenson, now bearing the full title of Royal Consort. He wore simple, functional black clothing, a deliberate contrast to the Zydonian splendor, emphasizing his unique status. Zylpha addressed the hushed council, her voice strong and unwavering. "The Crimson Blight demands adaptation. The actions of the Purity Collective show us that logic alone leads to stagnation and death. The only viable path forward is to embrace the strength found in complexity and resilience." She turned to Jenson, her brilliant green eyes shining with proprietary pride. The act of Consort Jenson on Ethel was not illogical or primitive. It was the purest manifestation of a high-level survival trait, the human will to thrive not just through calculation, but through the spirit of adaptive chaos. Jenson stepped forward, commanding the attention of the logical, ancient alien race. "My resilience isn't a resource you can extract," he stated, his voice ringing with honest, unaugmented power. "It's in the heart. It's in the ability to run when protocol says stop, to fight when the systems are down, and to love the thing you're protecting more than you love your own life." He announced the adaptation project, the first phase being the blending of the Zydonian and human bloodlines, symbolized by their future child. The council remained stoic, but the subtle micro-expressions of shock and fascination were visible across the room. Finally, Zylpha performed the ancient Zydonian ritual of the gift. Gal, the newly reinstated guard captain, approached, not bearing a traditional Zydonian energy weapon, but a sheathed object draped in royal silk. Zylpha accepted the object, presenting it to Jenson. "This is the blade of the first queen, Jenson. It symbolizes the logical dominance of our lineage." She unsheathed it, revealing a long, elegant sword. It wasn't the traditional Zydonian monofilament blade, which relied on power cells. It was a sword of simple, elegant, earth-forged steel. It was a blade that Jenson had designed, minimalistic, balanced, and deadly, requiring only the strength and skill of the wielder. "I give you the symbol of power, Jenson," Zylpha pronounced, her hand resting over his. "But it is a power you have always possessed. It requires no energy grid. It requires only the directness and the raw strength of the human spirit." Jenson took the sword, the familiar weight of the steel comforting in his hand. He met Zylpha's gaze, a flash of shared heat passing between them. The Zydonian Empire would not be saved by logic alone. It would be saved by the unpredictable, passionate, and infinitely adaptable chaos of the human heart, led by a queen who had chosen love and life over perfection and death. The throne room, once a symbol of rigid control, was now the foundation of a brand new, powerful, and utterly human future.